Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan Ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswatiji.
Welcome, everyone, to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. So loneliness is a really interesting thing, and then we'll come to the part about God being tangible and with us or not. But first, loneliness. Loneliness is a really interesting thing because it actually doesn't have anything to do with who you're with. Most of us associate loneliness with alone. Like, I am alone, therefore I'm lonely. But raise your hand if you've ever had a beautiful morning, afternoon, night, day, week, month, alone by yourself. Anybody else? Ever enjoyed some time alone by yourself? Right? Okay. So everybody. Yes, gotcha. And raise your hand if you've ever been with people. At a party, at a restaurant, at a club, anywhere. But actually felt lonely inside. Has anybody ever felt that? I know I have. Anybody else? Everybody. So here we are, unanimous. And it's important to realize that because that experience of loneliness isn't based on who's around us. You can be alone and feel full and complete and exuberant, excited, happy. And you can be surrounded by hundreds of people and feel lonely. It's not about the presence or absence of people. It's about the presence and absence of connection. Lack of connection leads to loneliness. But that connection doesn't necessarily have to be with people who are right there in front of you. COVID has shown us that. How easily it is to connect with people online, even if we can't be with them physically. But to have that connection. We miss them. We'd like to see them and hug them and hold their hands. But we have the connection anyway. So when you think about loneliness, don't think so much about who's around me, but think about, am I connected? The question then becomes, connected to whom? Because when we're connected to the people around us, or the people we're seeing through Zoom or WhatsApp, it's beautiful, but it's temporary. So if I were feeling lonely and I got on a FaceTime or a Zoom or a WhatsApp with a friend or a family member, while I was talking to them, I would no longer feel lonely. But the moment it was over, I would feel lonely again. The question then becomes, how do we take care of loneliness in a broader way so that it's not, I have to always be with someone who I'm deeply connected to. Because then it makes life really difficult. How many people do you have who you're really deeply connected to, right? A handful. Small handful, maybe just a couple. Maybe even just one. Then it means you're stuck, crazy glued to that person all the time. Otherwise, you're lonely. And that puts a big damper for you and for them. Prevents you from being able to maybe go a different place to do something, or having them go a different place to do something. If every time you are separate, not only do you miss them, but you are overcome with loneliness, then that's a major handicap. Then you can only go where they're going. They can only go where you're going. So the solution is to realize that actually we have within us two very beautiful opportunities for deep connection that are always with us. And the first and main one, or supreme one you could say, as the question asked, is Krishna. It's perfect as today is Gita Jayanti. We'll talk about God in the form of Krishna. But this is true regardless of how you connect with God. Some connect through Bhagavan Krishna. Some connect through Bhagavan Ram. Some connect through Shankar Bhagavan. Some connect through the Mother Goddess, through Mahalakshmi, through so many different ways. And then, of course, different religions. Then we start to have really a near infinite number of ways to connect to the divine. But there's never been a rule that which is meaningful has to be tangible. Right? The questioner said, my mind says God isn't there because God isn't tangible. Well, love isn't tangible. But we feel love. We know love is there. Nobody would ever doubt the presence of love just because it doesn't have a weight or a volume. We know it's there. Even in many ways, you can say electricity. As I look at the lights and the camera, well, it's not tangible in that way. It's tangible in its manifestation. So turn on a blender. That blender is tangible, but the electricity running through it isn't. Unless, of course, you stick your wet finger in a socket. Then electricity becomes kind of tangible. You get it? I love that. I love that. Thank you. Yes, exactly. So, I love when we have kids in Satsang. It's so great. So, when you stick your finger in a socket, suddenly you can feel the electricity. But otherwise, the only way that we know electricity exists is because the camera runs, the light runs, the fan runs. But the electricity itself isn't tangible. And in the same way, you can say, well, God, as every form and no form, as that which pervades all, in that infinite, formless expression isn't tangible. But all of the things that God pervades are tangible. Like the electricity isn't tangible, but the blender is, the camera is, the light is. Because it is being, because electricity is flowing through it. Well, that divine is flowing through every flower, every tree, every blade of grass, every drop of water, every species, not only humans, every species on earth is pervaded by the divine. So, hold a flower, that's tangible. Hug a tree, that's tangible. Hug your grandmother, that's tangible. And those are all expressions of God. The same way that the light coming from the bulb is the electricity. The sound coming from the radio is electricity. If there were no electricity, you would get no sound out of your radio. No electricity, you'd get no light out of the bulb. So the manifestations are tangible. But even if not, as we said, love isn't tangible, so it means the most beautiful things in the world are not tangible. But you know that they exist because you feel it. So don't allow your mind to steal your devotion by saying, well, God isn't tangible. Every time your mind says that, you can ask your mind, well, do I love my mom and dad? And then, of course, you'll say, yeah. And then you can have a little debate with your mind and you can say, well, prove it to me. Show it to me. How much does that love weigh? How big is it? What's its volume? And then, of course, the mind has to realize, that too is not tangible. So we connect with God knowing that God is always with us. But we also, if that's difficult, as it is for some people, remember that inside you also have you. You also have you inside. Now, we've got you as a manifestation of the divine, absolutely. But we also have just you as you, right? Now, raise your hand if you think that you are a good friend. That if someone wants to be your friend, are you a good friend? All right, so almost all of you. Almost all of you. So, if you're a good friend to others, what do they see in you? What do they like about you? Yeah. What would your best friend say about you? Huh?
You find everything good.
You see everything good. Wonderful. Accepting. Listening. Kindness. Loving. Beautiful. I'm sorry? Absolutely. I'm sorry? Helping. Absolutely. So you are loving and kind and helping and listening, positive, seeing the good. So you've got a really good friend with you. And so even if you can't feel God in you, well, you should feel yourself in you. And since yourself is in you, you're not alone. Because remember, all of your friends have a wonderful friend in you and really like you and think you're really special. You're really wonderful. And so when you find yourself alone with yourself, try to get to know that person who everyone thinks is such a good friend. And then you'll find that you're never alone. Who is that you who's loving and kind and listening and helping and always seeing the good? Who is that? Well, you've got that person with you all the time, wherever you go. So when you're feeling able to deeply connect with God in you, with that beautiful presence of God. But if you find that difficult at times, then just say to yourself, who's a good listener, I'm feeling kind of alone, feeling kind of lonely. And then let that loving, kind listener help you out. Recognize you've always got beautiful company. And if you are one of the people who didn't raise your hand that you're a good friend, well, you're cheating not only others, but you're cheating yourself. You're harming not only others, but you're harming yourself. And ask yourself, what is it that keeps me from being a good friend? And how can I change that? How can I become more kind, more loving, a better listener, more helpful, more positive for them, for the relationship, but also for you?
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Alaya, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit rain.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me. When is death called a peaceful death? So it's an interesting phrase because death itself is peaceful once we have died. From everything that we've heard, I don't have any personal memory of having died before and what it was like after I died before I was born. But from all of those who do, from all of the sages and the saints and the rishis and who have been able to access that state, even while alive and in the body so that they could share it with us. Death itself, once we have died, is peaceful. Now, obviously, if you've got karmic things to work out, there's going to be some karmic things to work out. You'll take another birth, and in that birth, you'll work out your karmic things, and those aren't always so peaceful. But that's the karmic package, right? If I'm left with some items in my karmic bank account, when I come back next life, I'm going to have to work through those. Some of them will be sweet, some will be bitter. So a peaceful death doesn't mean and every life thereafter, every minute will always be peaceful. That only happens when we've actually attained that state of moksha, of freedom, of liberation. That's why people bring asti, the ashes, to the banks of Ganga. It's why we perform sacred rites, or if not Ganga, to other sacred rivers. People have so many sacred rivers or other sacred places. But it's why we perform these rites and rituals. Is it said that these help that soul attain that state of oneness with God, where of course it's always peaceful. There's no coming back and struggling again. Those are the prayers of, may my loved one attain liberation. God, unko apni sharan mein rakho. Hold them in your lap, in your refuge. Make them be one with you. Why? Because then they won't have to come back and again go through this. So the concept of peaceful death, I think A, refers to the prior to taking birth experience of death, before we've taken another birth and we come through the birth canal screaming and crying. Before that, that state is peaceful. When we've been in pain in life, it said, well, at least now there's no pain, they are pain-free. The suffering they were experiencing, they are now free of that. And so they are in peace. It's also why we perform Shanti Puja. Even separate from or after an Asti Visurjan, after the ash immersion, we'll perform a Shanti Puja. It's why we perform all of our ancestral pujas during Shraddh, right? So that may they be in that state of liberation, of moksha, of total peace, of total oneness with God. But when you talk about a death being peaceful, so the actual act of passing being peaceful, because sometimes people will say, well, I know it's very sad that someone has died, but at least they had a peaceful death. You hear that a lot as well. And that really has to do with the state of mind of the person who was dying. It's not so much about how they died as the state of mind of the person who was dying. When someone is grasping on to life for dear life, not wanting to let go, fighting it, that's not going to be a peaceful passing. They may still experience peace after they die. And if they lived a beautiful life, they may absolutely attain that oneness with God. But that moment of passing may not be peaceful if they're not surrendering, if they're fighting it. And that's where spiritually we're taught, quite literally, to prepare for death. All of that hanging on to our egos that we do in life, well, that's what we're going to do in death. A lot of times people think, well, I'll just live this life full of lying and cheating and whatnot, and on my deathbed, because of course they say whatever you're thinking at the time of death, that's going to determine what happens after death. So a lot of times people think, well, I'll just, in those last 5 minutes, I'll be really pious. In those last 30 seconds, I'll just chant God's name. But the truth is, you're only going to live the last few minutes, bless you, exactly how you lived the rest of your life. You don't get a personality transplant on your deathbed. If your life was spent grasping and grabbing and pushing away and fighting and the ego. Well, that's exactly what it's going to be on your deathbed. And if your life was spent connected, surrendered, devoted, well, that's what it's going to be like on your deathbed. And that's why we're told, prepare for death while you live. It doesn't mean that we don't try to fight an illness. It doesn't mean that the minute we get a sore throat, we say, Chalo, ye to Bhagwan ki chahe ab main upar ja rahi hun. We do our best to stay alive, to stay healthy. But there's a moment when you know. And it may be only a few moments before death, it may be a few hours, it may be a few weeks. But where you know, okay, other than God's miracle, this is how it's going to go. And that's when the time really for that surrender comes. But you can only do that if you've lived like that. So in order to have a peaceful death, our mind has to be peaceful throughout our life. When things happen that aren't what we want, do we fight and scream and blame someone? Or do we accept? Not as a doormat, not as complacency that we don't try to change things, but on a deep level, do we accept God's will? Because if we do in life, then we will in passing. And of course, I know the question arises sometimes, well, if somebody's, let's say they were in pain, suffering, and so they put them on, pain medications, or they put them on morphine or something like that. And so that person isn't even in their right mind, or someone's in a coma. Well, that's okay. It's not that that person cannot have a peaceful death. It's not that you have to be medication-free. Very, very, very few people are medication-free at death. The vast majority of people are medicated in some way because they're dying of something that is painful. Whatever it may be, usually death is painful on a physical level. And so they're given pain medicine. And that does not interfere in any way with someone's ability to have a peaceful death. In fact, it may even help it. If someone's not in that state of just total consciousness, total surrender, actually to be medicated so they can be peaceful may actually be a beautiful blessing. And it doesn't have any impact on their karma. It doesn't have any impact on what happens after they die. It just eases that moment. Of course, we all think, God, it will be wonderful if I can just be fully conscious, fully aware, no pain. Some people think I'd like to die in my sleep. Also conscious, but in a different way, no pain. But the truth is, it's not in our hands. It's in the hands of our destiny. And so, this is where we work in our life to maintain that state of peace, to maintain a state of true surrender. Again, not complacency, not a doormat. Doesn't mean we don't act, doesn't mean we don't serve, doesn't mean we don't work. But along with that is just an awareness that may thy will be done. And if we live in a state of joy and a state of acceptance, what we want happens, great. What we want doesn't happen, okay. Something better is going to happen. When we've got that faith and that acceptance, then that stays with us. It stays with us into passing.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. बात यह है कि उसी समय हजारों साल पहले, thousands of years ago, even hundreds of years ago, even 50 years ago, in India, even maybe 20 years ago, the way that cows were kept was very different. Families had a cow. The cow was a member of the family. The cow was treated beautifully, fed beautifully, treated with love. When the cow had a baby, the baby would drink the milk first. Then, jo bacha hua tha, people drank it. The cows never were given steroids or anything like that. No chemicals, nothing. They were just given good food. And they spent their days roaming around on the grass, eating grass, being outside in the pastures and the fields. Now what has happened is, and I don't know all of the history, but my guess would be approximately it's been going on in America maybe 50, 60 years or so. In the mid-1980s, a book was written in America called Diet for a New America by a man named John Robbins, who was the son of Baskin-Robbins ice cream. Okay, so very famous ice cream. His father was Mr. Robbins and his uncle was Mr. Baskin. So he wrote a whole book on the horrible way that the cows were treated in their dairy farms. So that was mid-80s. So say it had been going on, I don't know, maybe let's call it 20 years before that, approximately. Again, I'm not a historian on that. But in India, I think it's much more recent. In India, I'm going to guess and call it 20 years. Maybe 30. But in the scheme of thousands and thousands of years, 20, 30 years is nothing. But what's happened is that milk has become factory produced. The cows who give milk are born to give milk. They are kept inside in factories, chained at the neck, kept in boxes. They are injected full of steroids. injected full of antibiotics because the conditions are so bad they keep getting sick. Now, in order for a cow to give milk, she has to be pregnant. That's why she gives milk, the same way that women give milk. It's not just I'm a woman, so I'm going to give milk. Getting pregnant is what starts that process. Now, in traditional India, you'd have a cow, there'd be a bull, the bull would impregnate the cow the way nature intended. It was all very natural. The way that it happens now in these factories, and there have been so many documentaries done on this, it's basically rape. The men working in the factories, literally, kehna nahi chahiye, like in apne pucha, they literally take their arms and they stick them, they've got a needle, it's artificial insemination, but they literally stick, with no anesthesia, no nothing, they stick their arms all the way inside the cow and actually inseminate up into the uterus. And if you see in these videos, it's literally like they're raping women. If you hear what they are saying about these cows as they're doing it, just say a man would yell at a woman who he's raping in the same way these men are yelling at these cows as they are doing with their hands. Over the last 10, 20 years, there have been so many sting operations. So now these days it's even easier. But even before, so many people have gone in with cameras, with videos of what it's like. So milk has now become an industrially produced commodity. It's violent. And when the cows stop giving milk, because a cow only gives milk for a few years, it used to be she stopped giving milk. Tika. She still stayed. She was there. Now they are killed immediately and they become beef. The dairy industry and the beef industry and the veal industry are all one. When that pregnant cow gives birth, her calves do not drink, not one drop, because that milk is money. The cows are taken away immediately at birth, and the cow cries. I mean, you should see these videos. You can hear these cows crying. It's a mother, she's given birth. Unki bachchi hai. Immediately after birth, the child is taken away. And then, because veal is such an expensive commodity, you get a lot more money for a piece of veal than you do for a hamburger. Well, veal is very, very, very tender. That's why they call it tender veal cutlets. Very, very, very soft baby cow. Well, but it's soft because there's no muscle. When the cow stands to drink from its mother, it develops muscles. So they literally take these calves, they bury them in sand up to here, or they stick them in a cage where they literally can't stand up. Because every bit of them that develops muscle, it's no longer tender. It's no longer soft. Muscle is hard. And they force feed these calves to get big and fat. And then they kill them. So it used to be that even though we didn't eat beef, drinking milk was totally separate. People who kept cows did not then kill the cows and eat the cows. But now the dairy industry and the meat industry have become one. So that's the big reason for it, is the dairy industry now has become an industry of violence. It is no longer reverence, it is no longer Go Mata. It has become an industry of violence. For me, on a personal level, I was a vegan, means don't drink milk, even before I moved to India 25 years ago. When I came here to the ashram, where we have our own cows, and the cows are treated like members of the family, obviously the babies drink first, the babies stay with the mothers. Jo bachche hue hain, humko peene ka mauka milte hain. After they stop giving milk, they still are kept. We always say it's like a cow old age home and cow child care. And so one part Goshala, where they give milk, one part, child care center, one part old age home. But I don't drink milk anywhere else. Unless I'm at someone's house who has their own cow, and I know that cow is treated like a member of the family with love, whatnot. But that's very rare that people still have cows. Some do, most don't. But otherwise, I don't drink milk anywhere in the world for that reason. But there's also a whole other element to it, which I have found very interesting, because you mentioned the hinsa aspect, the aspect of violence. But there's also a whole trend now in health and wellness that actually says that milk is bad for you. If you go to any holistic medicine practitioner in the West, they will tell you, give up dairy, give up sugar, give up gluten, right? But dairy is right up there. Every healthcare wellness program says no dairy. And the reason for that, it took me a long time, because I was like, Ayurveda says it's great for us. But all of this science is showing it's horrible for you. That's a different reason. That has to do with what's called A1 and A2 milk. It's actually two different types of cows. Jo hum desi go bolte hain is actually a different type of cow. Those are the types of cows that the science of Ayurveda says this milk is nectar. The ones that have the hump. The cows that don't have the hump are the cows whose milk is not good for you. So that's aside even from the aspect of violence, but just the aspect of health. So even if the Jersey cows were treated nicely, it's still not Amrit. But if the Desi go is treated like a member of the family, then by Ayurveda it is considered Amrit. Yes. But from a Hinsa perspective, tragically, even in India now, and again, not everywhere. Bibi in India, there's some dairies that are still rooted in respect, but it's quite rare. And the question, of course, becomes, when those cows stop giving milk, to fir kya hota hai? Because economically, remember, for a company to be feeding an animal that it gets nothing from is not a very viable economic model. So I imagine, if you're running a dairy, it's a business. And so when the cows stop giving milk, the only thing that makes economic sense, if that's your model, is to sell it, to become beef, exactly. So by drinking milk, then, you're literally putting money in the pockets of the people who are killing cows to eat them. So that's the reason for that.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, Their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. And the mind works in patterns. We talk about them as sanskaras. Neurologically, we speak about them as patterns or neural networks. And they literally become like grooves in our psyche. We have automatic ways that we act. They've become autopilot. We don't even have to think about it. The things that make us angry, we are angry. The things that make us upset, we are upset. Our habitual way of acting, habitual way of speaking, we don't think about it. It's not like we're making a decision every moment. We're on autopilot most of the time in these patterns. And so yes, we come, we learn, and then we go back and we're back in our patterns. Well, and that's why it's so important to create a new pattern, a new sanskara, a new way. Not easy, but absolutely doable. It just takes time and it takes attention until that becomes your new way. If you are used to sleeping in really late every day and you decide you're going to start getting up and you're going to meditate. So in the beginning, it's going to be really hard. The body, the mind are going to scream, no, no, no. Let me stay in bed. And if you give in, then you'll never develop a new habit. But if you just for the first couple of weeks literally force yourself out of bed, whatever it takes, by hook or crook, what you'll find is that you will set a new pattern, a new way, that it becomes easier day by day. If you've got a habit of getting angry, of yelling, if you've got a habit of yelling when somebody does something, well, if you allow yourself to keep yelling, you'll keep yelling. But if you decide from now on, no yelling, and even if you get halfway through a sentence and then you remember, oh, no yelling, and you stop, slowly, slowly, you will develop a whole new way of being. But it's going to take some time. It's a new habit. It's a whole new habit. It's like if you break your arm, and your arm is in a cast, you're right-handed, and you break your right hand, it's in a cast. Well, on day one, if you try to sign your name with your left hand, you're nowhere. But if your arm's been in a cast for a month or 6 weeks, by the end of those 6 weeks, you find you actually can sign your name quite nicely with your left hand. You've developed a new groove. The brain has literally changed to enable you to develop this new way of being. And so for you, while you're here, lay a new pattern. If you allow it to just stay like upad ka gyan, then it's not going to trickle down and change you. But if you allow it to actually go deep, and you allow yourself after satsang then to introspect, make it yours, make it personal. Yes, there was wisdom, but what does that mean for me? It's not gyan for gyan's sake. It's what does it mean in my life? Allow yourself to really contemplate that while you're here. See what it means for the patterns of your life while you're here. While you're here, think about what you're going to change. What will be different? Write it down. And start it while you're here. Make it really specific. This is what I've understood. Therefore, this is how I'm going to change. Write down what you've learned. Keep it with you. So that then every night before you sleep, you can relearn. It doesn't have to be pages and pages. It can be bullet points. But that which impacted you. Because what I've seen with satsang is everyone walks away with the parts that are meant for them. And so many people in such different life circumstances say, that was exactly what I needed to hear. But they've heard it for very different reasons, and they've even heard different things. So note down what it means for you. Where are going to be the places in your life that you're likely to get stuck? That you're likely to fall back? And then it's just a matter of being conscious. When you enter those moments again, can you enter them consciously? Knowing, oh yeah, this is one of those challenging situations where I'm likely to slip back. It's like they always say, going back into the family. You come to an ashram, you go on a meditation retreat, there's all this beautiful awakening, and then people go back into their families, right? So we know families are challenges. So be aware of that, recognize that, okay, what are my triggers? And how can I do this family situation differently? Now that I've understood things differently. And then walk into those situations very conscious, very aware, like you're doing something for the first time. Because you're doing it differently for the first time.
This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week, and I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on OMTimes Radio.